This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by VegOne and the good folks over at the Vegan Society. VegOne is the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by vegans for vegans. It was introduced back in 2005, updated in 2021 with an incredible new plastic-free package, and contains all of those key vitamins and minerals that everyone will tell you when you transition into a plant-based diet, into a vegan lifestyle, that you need to think about, and you absolutely do. So, what's in there? You've got B2, B6, B12, D3, iodine, selenium and folic acid. So all of those kind of key ones you need to consider when you're starting out, or perhaps you've been here for some time. And it's all in a convenient once a day chewable form, which is super helpful, right? It's just £12.70 for 6 months worth, and they come in two amazing flavours. You've got orange and you've also got blackcurrant. Orange is a personal favourite of mine. I'm definitely team orange when it comes to VegOne. So if you'd like to know more and you're interested in picking up your 6 month supply, head over to thevegansociety.com, search for VegOne, and you can pick up some right there, delivered straight to your door. Enjoy the episode. Kayleigh, it would be awesome to get started with a little bit of your personal journey into the world of veganism. What brought you here?
It was a long journey, if I'm on. Well, it's been a few years, but it started from a health perspective. So several years ago, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was adopted, so we don't know the family history. And so at the time when obviously she was diagnosed, we spoke to the consultant and said, what's the situation with getting myself and my sister tested to see if we had the gene that means that we're predisposed to a higher risk of breast cancer. And weirdly, they basically said that because we didn't know if there was a history in the family, they wouldn't do the test. And so I kind of thought, well, surely if we don't know, it's more reason to do the test. That they basically logical. Said, yeah, exactly. But they said no. And interestingly, I found out quite recently, actually, that the only reason they do the test is for research purposes. So they like to do the test to just see whether their theory is right. And if there's no historical record to back up the findings, they can't say, oh yes, this gene is related to breast cancer, because we can see in the back of that family another 3 or 4 cases. So that's essentially where we were left with. It was, okay, we don't know if we're more at risk. We can't get the test. So I sort of sat back and said, well, okay, how do I minimise my risk? What can I do generally that will mean that I'm at a lower risk of getting cancer? And so off I went, Googling and looking into things. And it was around the same time that the research had come out saying that red meat and processed meat were a carcinogenic. It was proven that they cause cancer. And it was something that had just never really occurred to me. That it sounds crazy to say it now, but the food I was eating, the things I was putting into my body, could cause this kind of disease. And so I sort of sat back and said, okay, well, I'm going to cut back. I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to reduce my meat intake. But once you start on that journey and you start researching things like this, you very quickly discover more that you aren't aware of. And so I came home one day and I said to Lee, I want to go vegetarian. I want to try being vegetarian. And I very much expected to get the male reaction of, I'm not giving up my steak. I'm not, like societal concept of men eat meat. And he just said, yeah, okay, let's give it a go. So it's like, wow, right, brilliant. And so we sat there that first week and we sort of said, okay, well, what do we eat? Because I'd always said for a long time, I couldn't be vegetarian because I didn't like vegetables. And and looking back now, it was just crazy to think I used to say that. So we sort of started on the vegetarian journey, and then I started to understand more around the environmental impact of animal agriculture, and obviously the animal rights impact or the animal exploitation that comes with animal agriculture and the meat and dairy industry. And I'd always said I was an animal lover, was always something that I said I was, and yes, I did love animals, but I was so disconnected to the impact my daily choices were having on the animals that I said I loved. And so it was a case of slowly understanding how to transition to veganism and making that switch and making daily changes in our life to change our diet. It was predominantly around our diet that we were focused on. But it was really interesting because my stepdad and my mum are both vegan, and I always remember my stepdad saying to me, because I was very passionate about the environment, and I got involved with environmental activism, and I remember him saying to me, you can't care about the environment if you eat meat and dairy. And at the time I thought he was being a bit what's the word, I thought he was being a bit extreme. Let's use that word. I thought he was being extreme. And he was totally right. The more I looked into it and discovered the impact that animal agriculture has in regards to land use, water use, pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, it was just so blatantly obvious that I had to, if I really cared, I had to take those steps to live a vegan life. And so what started out as a health decision is now very much environmental and animal rights. And the health thing has kind of gone out the window, especially where you've got, the new vegan Ben and Jerry's, and you've got VFC, and you've got One Planet Pizza, and you've got all of this cool vegan junk food. So the health element has kind of fallen by the wayside, but the ethics of veganism are what have kept us going, basically, of what we hold on to. So now me and Lee are both vegan. Our dog's vegan. It's the whole group, the whole gang are all vegan now.
Oh, fantastic news! Congratulations. What year was that roughly?
So switching to vegetarianism was probably about 8-9 years ago, and then veganism, fully vegan, was probably about 3-4 years ago now. But I don't have a specific date.
Yeah. It's more gradual.
But it was really interesting because I was talking to someone about this before, because they don't have a date of going vegan, and they also were a smoker, and a long time ago I was a smoker, and we were talking about habits and breaking habits and whether you had an anniversary date. And she said that actually it's quite good if you don't have a date, because if you have a date, you always have this marker of, that's the time that I, for want of a better terminology, that's the time that I gave up something. That's the time that I quit that part of my life. That's the time that I gave up something that I enjoyed. And actually, if you don't have a date, there's never that marker of, oh, that's the day that I stopped smoking. That's the day that I gave up alcohol. That's, there's all of that kind of thing. And so she said, it just then becomes a part of your life. It's just, I'm vegan. I don't smoke. I don't drink. There's all of these things that it's not a date that you mark on a calendar. It's just then part of your life, which I thought was a really interesting way to look at it.
It is, yeah. As the journey was quite gradual. You mentioned that point about stopping points and abstinence and so on. Did it feel like abstinence, or did actually that gradual process, was it actually quite favourable in terms of getting comfortable with it and used to the idea of being vegan?
At no point did it ever really feel like abstinence. It just didn't, which is a really weird thing to say, because prior to going vegetarian and vegan, I always looked at it as I was giving something up. I'd be giving something up. My life would be restricted. I wouldn't have all of these options. I wouldn't have as fulfilled a life if I didn't have the option to eat meat and dairy. And actually, it's completely opened up a whole new world. There are so many more options, so many more opportunities, and it's broadened our horizons. So I think probably the biggest thing that made it a slow process was sort of friends and family, going out for meals, going to parties. It was just that more societal pressure, or the societal limitations that made it a slower process, because it did sometimes it felt like a chore, because you'd go to a restaurant and everyone would want to go, for example, to, I don't know, a steak restaurant, and you sat there and looking at the menu thinking, well, I've got to eat chips and soup type thing. Don't get me wrong, I would never sit there and eat that steak, but you'd sort of sometimes sit there and think, okay, I'm going to have that bit of cake because I'm starving and I'm with all these people and all the rest of it, and there's no other alternative. But then, and I think that's why it was a slow process, because at the time it was about health and it wasn't about ethics. But as the ethics started to come through, and my understanding of the impact on the environment and animal rights and animal exploitation, sitting there in that restaurant or sitting there at that friend's house and having that option of, do I eat just the chips or do I eat the cream cake? I'd look and go, well, I'm having the chips. But to be fair, I prefer chips. But
me too.
But it was sort of a case of, it wasn't about a personal decision. I wasn't making that decision based on my health. I was making that decision based on the impact that decision would have on the animal that would have had to have given their life or been exploited for my choice. And once it became more about the ethics of it, it was so much easier to just transition and say, that's it. I'm all of that stuff that I've been kind of compromising on, I'm not compromising on that anymore. And Lee and I have always said as well that since going vegan, we have such better experiences when we eat out, and just even when we eat at home, because we look at the alternative options. We don't just go straight for that option that we'd have always gone for, the steak, the chicken burger, whatever it was. When you're, I feel like when we were in the meat eating stage of our lives, you kind of always chose the same option off the menu. But actually, when you say, I'm not having that option, you then open your horizons to everything else that's there. And I always remember that it was a Christmas dinner. We went out with Lee's family. They're all meat eaters. Unfortunately, we've not managed to convert many of them to veganism yet. We're working on it. But we went out for dinner with them all, and they all had the traditional Christmas dinner, and we had this tomato gnocchi dish. It was the vegan option. And we sat there, and Lee and I had this, it was just the most delicious meal. It was so nice. And everyone else on the table complained about their food. Everyone did. And Lee and I just sat there and looked at each other and thought, the vegan option's the best one. We're winning. So, yeah, it's never... It only ever felt like a compromise and restrictive at the beginning. But once we've gone through that process and got comfortable with it and understood it more, it feels like it's opened more opportunities, and it feels like it's actually made our lives better and more enriched and more exciting than it would have done if we hadn't have made this transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely concur with that. Thinking about the thing that you mentioned just a moment ago about there being more options now, things getting easier, that so on and so forth. The vegan junk food kind of taking over the health mission that you were originally on and all that kind of stuff. And I absolutely can relate to that. Do you think that there's almost a danger, if you like, that it's that the rise of kind of the vegan junk food means that people will fall into a similar kind of lull to the one that they were in before, insofar as, I just, and forgive me for, it might be a silly reflection, but just thinking about it as you said it, I was like, I'm kind of in that space now. Sometimes I go to certain restaurants and I'll pick the burger, the vegan burger will be the stock option because it's now there and it wasn't there before. And whereas before, like I remember initially, it was 4.5 years ago for me, I remember going into a local, it's a chain of restaurants, but relatively small one. And the only option was like a lentil dal. And I would never have picked it before. Never. I might have made it at home, but I would have never have picked it. And it was amazing. It was lovely. And then it became my go-to until that same restaurant then added a moving mountains burger to their menu. Do you think there's a sort of almost any kind of element of risk to that, and the route that we're driving down, that we lose a bit of the diversity in what we were getting?
Yes, in a word. It is something that I've talked about with several people in regards to the fact that obviously one of the big benefits of a vegan diet for a long time was the fact that it was so healthy, and it did reduce your risks of certain diseases, and you lowered your cholesterol, you were at lower risk of diabetes, all of that kind of stuff. And the more of these vegan junk food options we have, yes, the more that benefit of a vegan diet will be eroded. So I think there is a potential risk of that, but at the same time I also look at it from a different perspective and think there are a lot of people out there who are curious about the vegan lifestyle and the vegan diet, and who are very wed to the burger, for example. And if they've got that option to try something plant-based that is a burger, then it's a great stepping stone. So I think from a perspective of enabling people to transition, I think it's really valuable, and I think it's really important, and I think it starts to overcome the objection that we've always had in regards to it being restrictive. I don't want to be vegan because I can't have a burger. I don't want to be vegan because I can't go out to a restaurant and I can't have a nice meal. I have to have the salad, for example. You know, it overcomes all of those objections, and it starts to put us in a position where you can't argue against having a vegan meal because you've got so many options there. But I think we do have to make sure that we eat these things in moderation. You know, like everything, you can't have a processed burger every night. It's not going to be good for you. But I think as you move more into the vegan lifestyle and more into the vegan diet, you start coming more into the vegan diet, people start experimenting with more food, they start experimenting with more ingredients, and actually then the whole food element does start to come into their diet as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a dietitian, it's not my area of expertise, but from a personal perspective, we eat so much healthier now than we ever did before, even being vegetarian. So we eat so much healthier now, but it is really nice to have the option of maybe on a Friday night, just say, let's just have some vegan junk food. You get the balance, which I think is really important, especially to help people transition. And the more people we can get to transition, the better it is for everything. So
yeah, definitely. I'd like to sort of pick your brains from a marketing perspective, and I want to get right into the business and so on, and talk about that a bit more squarely in a second. But just whilst it's on my mind, there's a question relating that's just popped in, which is about obviously veganuary we're in now, and a lot of folks I speak to love the choice that's out there, love the products that often pop up, as we know in the sort of community. They pop up for a month and then we sort of then mourn them in February when they sort of suddenly disappear. But one of the things that a couple of people have pointed out, and I've certainly noticed myself, is that there's still a tax on those products. There's still an additional cost. I was looking at an example. There was a British name in the retail industry that sells clothes and food on the high street, and they have a sandwich range, for example, and they've got a version of an egg and cress sandwich and a vegan version of an egg and cress sandwich. And there's the vegan version is like 20 pence higher than the other version. And then I looked at a couple more, and they were all similarly like 20, 30 pence higher than the other one. And so I sort of see it as like or maybe I'm wrong, but I sort of feel there's like a double-edged issue. Is that there's the kind of the potential for the products that are offered as part of veganuary are often in the kind of junk food realm, which is kind of good from the choice element, but they're also expensive. And I worry about folks who come into it and think this is veganism. This is what it is. I'll go to the vegan aisle. And, when I go shopping, I'll go to the vegan aisle, and that's where all their food is, as opposed to going to, the dried goods aisle and picking up some lentils, as opposed to going to the fruit and veg aisles and picking up some fresh produce. So I'd love to get your sort of take on that from a marketing point of view, if nothing else. Like, do you think, if you were tasked with, I've got to not just sell this product for this company, but I've got to push the message of veganism, are we doing it in the right way through the current kind of methodology? That's a long, old, rambling question. Hopefully you can make some sense out of that.
I made sense of it, don't worry. so I think what you've raised is a really big challenge for the vegan sector, because what a lot of people don't realise is the fact that the meat and dairy industry are heavily subsidised with taxes, with tax money, and to keep the prices low. So the prices that people pay for meat and dairy products aren't the true cost of those products, because the government subsidise it to make sure that when we get them at the supermarket, it's at a lower price. So people don't realise, people don't realise that, and also they don't realise that actually we are paying more for meat and dairy because we're paying for it through our taxes, because the taxes we pay are going into those industries. So there is a real challenge there in that, how do you fight with government subsidies? I mean, personally, I would love it if I could choose where my taxes go and I had like a tick box and I said, right, I don't want it to go there, I want it to go here, there and the other, but I very much doubt that's going to happen anytime soon. So it's a really tough challenge, and unfortunately a lot of people do look at the vegan, people who aren't in the vegan world already do look at it and say, well, hang on a sec, that burger is like £5, or 2 burgers are £5. But I can go to the meat aisle and I can buy a pack of 8 for £2. So it's a really big challenge, and I think at the moment it's definitely a situation where it's economy of scale. And you look at the animal agriculture industry, it's a very established industry. It's had a lot of investment put into it. It's worked out how to streamline its process to bring the costs down. You look at any piece of technology, for example, let's think about phones, smartphones. When they came out, they were extraordinarily expensive. But as the technology has been developed, it's become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And I think the same will happen with veganism. So we're still relatively young. These products that are coming out now, these meat alternatives, the plant-based burgers, etc., it's a relatively young industry in comparison to the meat and dairy industry. So I think, fast forward even 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I think the prices of these products will come down, especially because we'll get to economy of scale. Because the more people that buy these products, the more the manufacturers can buy their products at wholesale, which brings the prices down, which means they can then obviously pass those prices on to the consumer. But that doesn't solve the problem right now. That's sort of a long-term situation. So one of the big things one of the ways to overcome the price differential is to not talk about it in regards to price. If you start trying to market a product just on price, you're never going to win when your product is £5 versus the meat product, which is £2. So we have to start talking about it in a different way. So it's about talking about a mission. It's about talking about the other benefits that come with that product. So whether it's a reduced carbon footprint, whether it's a health benefit, whether it's talking about the number of animals that are saved. And once we start talking about things that aren't price focused, and we start to talk to consumers in a slightly different way, I think that will help us to overcome the price difference of products right now. We need to talk to consumers about the other benefits rather than just price. But I will touch on something actually. There's an article that I saw recently by Go Compare. I found it quite so it was Compare the Market. And they put out an article saying, can you afford to go vegan? And when I saw it, I thought, this is strange. I wouldn't expect to see an article like this from Compare the Market when I instantly think of them as insurance. So I was reading through the article, and it was quite balanced in that they were talking about the fact that if you actually compare a whole food vegan diet and a whole food meat based diet, the vegan diet is always cheaper. You know, you can't say that a vegan diet is going to be more expensive than when you're comparing a steak and a tin of chickpeas. You know, the meat diet is never going to be cheaper. So if you compare on a whole foods basis, then the vegan diet is always cheaper. If you compare on a processed level, the plant-based diet is more expensive, as for the reasons obviously we've already discussed. But if you talk about it in a real world term, you know, we're not all eating whole food, or we should be, but, you know, most of us aren't eating a fully whole food diet.
We're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm not.
No, well, neither am I, unfortunately. It started out was the plan, but slowly that's not happened. But yeah, none of us are eating a fully whole food diet, and none of us are eating a fully processed diet. We're eating a combination of the two, and that's what it was saying. It was saying you need to look at it on balance, and it was giving some tips and advice on, you know, if you want that processed burger and price is a factor for you, buy the supermarket own brand, because generally they are quite similar in price to the meat product. Because supermarkets can buy in bulk, they've got much bigger supply chains, they've got much bigger negotiation power than some of these smaller niche vegan brands that are coming out. So if price is a factor for you, then look at buying some of the cheaper supermarket brands. But you can't say one or the other is more expensive or cheaper than the other. It's your diet. How do you live? And there's always ways that you can make a vegan diet cheaper than a meat-based diet. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
It certainly does. And I saw that post. You actually drew my attention to it, that Compare the Market one. I talked about it with another guest on a podcast yesterday, and we had a little discussion about it because I thought the point you raised in your, I think it was a LinkedIn post, was it, that you put out there. The point you raised that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about was the fact that a company like that is putting advertising revenue or advertising dollars into an advert that talks about veganism. So they obviously feel there is enough there that is on their customers' minds, which in itself is a positive sign, I guess, of they feel like there is a conversation to be had. Whereas I think, you know, if we were completely ignorable over in the vegan community, they certainly wouldn't have spent any money on it. And at that point, I thought was fascinating that you raised.
You look at it and you see so many big brand businesses coming out with vegan ranges, vegan messaging, and talking to the vegan consumer, and also to the people, the flexitarian consumer. And it's really, really exciting to see, because it does show that veganism is on the rise. You know, people are switching onto it, and if big business are looking at it and thinking, right, we need a piece of this, that's really exciting, because it means there's going to be even more options coming out for us for us vegans already, and for people transitioning to make that transition. But I think it does raise a big issue for ethical vegan businesses. So the businesses that have been championing veganism for the last, 30, 40, 50 years, they've been here from the start. They've been fighting, they've been raising the message, they've been laying the foundations for this huge shift that we're seeing now. And if we're not careful, these big corporate businesses will come in and just skim all the cream off of the top of that, for want of a better terminology. Sometimes I realise how much we use
cream. We do
the
use
vegan
a lot,
cream,
don't we?
Yes, yeah. But they'll come in and they'll skim all of the profits and all of the hard work that other people have done, and they'll take the profits from that. So, kind of running back into the conversation we were having before around how do you compete on price, and how do you speak to the consumer when a meat product is cheaper. I think I'm sort of saying about how we need to talk about the mission, and we need to talk about people talk to people about different things. I think it's the same now in regards to any business. Vegan businesses need to make sure that they are talking about their mission, and they're engaging with their end user, and they're engaging with their audience, and they're creating a tribe as such, to make sure that these bigger brands don't come in and basically take the market. Because, I mean, for us, we want vegan businesses to win. That's a big mission for us, is to make sure that the vegan businesses can compete with the big boys, even when they don't have, multi-million-pound budgets to spend, they can still fight the big boys with their ethics, because the big boys don't have the same ethics as the vegan businesses do. So we need to make sure that the ethics of our businesses are coming out, and so that when people are making these purchasing decisions, they know that they're putting their money in the right place, and they're not just lining another fat cat's pocket so they can go off and go on another mega yacht cruise over the winter. So
you've just absolutely kind of given me a nice bit of reassurance, actually, because I think, you know, as we were getting into that conversation, I'd started to think a little bit gloomily. Actually, I was just starting to think, you know, do you know what, that veganism might ultimately win, but there's a lot of people who are gonna suffer along the way, like you say, the sort of pioneers in this space, people were at the outset of, I don't know, say a food product maybe, or a clothing product, and they've poured their heart and soul and their ethics into that product, and then somebody is, like you say, they're going to come along and say, well, we can do that, we'll do it, you know, we'll outsource where it's produced, we'll make it 5 times cheaper than that one, and bang, like, job done. But you're absolutely right. What we can say from history is that what they won't do is pour the same ethics into it. So that will be lost, and there'll always be that space. I feel like, maybe optimistically, but vegans, probably unlike a lot of other demographics, won't tolerate a cheapened product that loses all of their ethics, even if it's just vegan. You know, I see it like at the beginning of people's vegan journey, they'll be like, yeah, I'll take on that, you know, KFC vegan bucket of whatever, the new chicken bucket, and then it's not too long before I speak to the same person and they're like, no, I wouldn't ever go to KFC. It's great as a transitioning tool. You know, the amount of times I've had that conversation on this podcast about where folks are like, no, it's great as a transitioning tool, but I wouldn't go anywhere near that company. So you've made me more optimistic, actually, after that initial gloomy thought passed through my mind. Isn't it? Actually, maybe we do have something unique.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by VegOne and the good folks over at the Vegan Society. VegOne is the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by vegans for vegans. It was introduced back in 2005, updated in 2021 with an incredible new plastic-free package, and contains all of those key vitamins and minerals that everyone will tell you when you transition into a plant-based diet, into a vegan lifestyle, that you need to think about, and you absolutely do. So, what's in there? You've got B2, B6, B12, D3, iodine, selenium and folic acid. So all of those kind of key ones you need to consider when you're starting out, or perhaps you've been here for some time. And it's all in a convenient once a day chewable form, which is super helpful, right? It's just £12.70 for 6 months worth, and they come in 2 amazing flavours. You've got orange and you've also got blackcurrant. Orange is a personal favourite of mine. I'm definitely team orange when it comes to VegOne. So if you'd like to know more and you're interested in picking up your 6-month supply, head over to thevegansociety.com, search for VegOne, and you can pick up some right there, delivered straight to your door.
No, totally. And there was some really interesting research, and you'll have to forgive me because I can't remember the specific figures, but there was some interesting research that came out at the end of last year, so it's the beginning of 2021, around the choices people are making and what's driving those choices. And there was a big shift in regards to people making purchasing decisions based not just on price, but based on the impact that purchase would have. Whether that's in veganism or just general society, people are becoming much more aware of the impact that their purchasing decisions make, and they are much more focused on trying to make sure that where they spend their money, that the places they spend their money are places that are going to use that money for good. You know, there's not speak to people, and how many people say that they love Amazon. Most people absolutely hate Amazon, and they're looking for an alternative because they know that money is not going to the right place. As much as Jeff Bezos came back from his flight from space and said, oh, I looked at the Earth and realised how fragile it is, most of us didn't have to go to space to realise that, Jeff. You know, we already know that. So, you know, as much as he tries to make out that he's wanting to save the world, it's not a good company. It's an incredibly unsustainable company built on mass consumerism, and people are becoming more and more switched on to that. And it's really exciting to see, both obviously from with my vegan hat on, but also with my environmental activism hat on. It's been really empowering to see over the last couple of years people's mindset shift, and how many more people are becoming engaged in, okay, I may be one person, but I have an impact, and I want to make sure that impact is a good one. So yeah, I think that's how vegan and ethical businesses will win, is by making sure that their mission and their ethics are integral to their marketing, and their customers know about it, so that they are then reassured that not only are they buying a good quality product, or they're buying a product that fits their purpose, they're also buying one that is, they're spending their money with a company that will be doing good in the world. So I think that's how we beat the big boys.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for the optimism.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it and needed it. and another thought that's just run through my mind, actually, as you said that, is like, actually one of the sort of maybe the unintended positives out of this sort of very individualistic culture that we have, is that if you flip it on its head a little bit, we are probably, like you say, looking at our individual footprint a little bit more, and what is it that we are doing that's causing damage? What about my purchase decisions, that kind of stuff? And that you combine that with probably a bigger, more of a sense of distrust in, whether it be governments, whether it be big organisations. You combine those two things, and you get hopefully some more maybe individualistic but ethical consumers who want to make the right choices, which is a fascinating point. Thank you. Give me a hell of an education here. Sorry for repeating things you've said, but I'm just understanding, just getting my head around it all. Let's talk about Kakadu. It'd be good to get into where did that start, and what is it for folks who don't know?
Okay, so Kakadu it's Kakadu Creative, and we're a full service creative agency. So we help purpose-led businesses with impactful, engaging and standout branding, and then applying that brand across all of their marketing materials, so print, events, websites, for example, etc. And it started, we're nearly 4 years old now, and Lee and I, who run the business, we both worked for a big corporate multinational magazine publisher, and had been there for almost a decade. And I worked in the advertising department, and Lee worked in he worked in several departments, doing the design for first advertising, marketing, and then editorial. And I'd been steadily going up the ranks and climbing the career ladder, and getting higher and higher in the business, and working with bigger and bigger companies. And I got to the point where I think as I was becoming more aware of the world around us and the state the planet was in, I was becoming more and more aware of what my job was actually all about and the impact it had. And my whole job was essentially trying to help big multinationals sell more products to people, products that they don't need. And one of the last departments I worked in was the parenting sector, and so my job was basically helping to tell parents that they needed to buy more stuff to be a better parent, and I just would sit there and think, this is not what my life is meant to be. I'm not meant to be trying to make people buy more stuff so that they can be a good parent. A child doesn't need a £1,500 pram. It doesn't need all of this, these fancy toys. Most kids are happy with a wooden spoon. It didn't sit right with me. And the longer I was there for, the more disillusioned I was getting with it, and the more I felt like this was just not where my skills were meant to be used. And Lee and I sort of were talking about it, and talking about, okay, well, what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? What's the plan? And we sort of sat back and said, well, do you know what? We've got really complementary skills. So I've got all of these project management skills, sales skills, business development skills, customer skills. He's got all of these amazing design skills. They work. Why don't we take these skills, join them together, and use them for good? You know, use them to help businesses to have a better impact. But interestingly, when we first started the business, we weren't working with overtly ethical companies. So we were working with what we would like to term neutrally ethical. So they weren't doing anything good, but they weren't doing anything inherently bad. And it was kind of just the way it worked initially. It just evolved that way on its own. And then a couple of years ago, we sat back and we said, okay, right, is this what we want? Is this what we set out to do? You know, was this really our purpose and our mission? No. Well, how do we change that? How do we make sure that we are going in the right direction? And it boiled down to, we need to bring our ethics and our morals to the front of the business. So we always ran the business as a vegan business. It was always sustainable. It was always ethical from our own personal business decisions. But we didn't talk about that publicly, and we didn't talk about it necessarily to our customers. And that was really because we were worried that it would turn people off. You know, a new business, starting out, you've got bills to pay, you've got the mortgage, you've got all of those pressures. So you kind of do the work that you feel comfortable with. But when we really sat back and looked at it, it wasn't the work we wanted to do. They weren't the businesses that we wanted to help grow and establish. And so we said, right, okay, let's do this. Let's pin our flag to the pole. Let's tell people what we're about. Let's talk about this publicly, and let's start having conversations around what ethical, sustainable, and vegan business actually looks like. And for all of our worries that it would turn customers off and we'd end up, you know, a couple of years down the line and we'd be bankrupt and the business would be gone. They were all unfounded, totally unfounded. It's been one of the best things we've done for our business, because it's meant that not only are we having conversations with people and businesses that are ethically aligned, and we're now able to help those businesses to grow and establish because they can see that we're on the same mission to them and we are passionate about what they're doing. It's also opened up conversations with previous customers about things that they would have never thought about. And it was really, really lovely this week. I was on a call to a customer, sort of one of our legacy customers that we've had from when we started the business. And I was having a chat with him, and I've talked openly with him now about my environmental activism and our veganism and all the rest of it. And we were chatting during this week, and he said, do you know what? He said, I've been thinking about it. And he said, and I want to give veganism a go. Can you help me? And I was like, yes, you know, here are a load of resources. Here's this, sign up to Veganuary, do this. I've sent him loads of stuff. And if we hadn't have brought our ethics to the front of the business, I'd have never had that conversation with him. He would have never thought about it. I mean, not that he probably would have thought about it, but he would have never thought about having that conversation with me. And I would have never been able to help him take those first steps. So not only from a business perspective has it been great, because it's helped to push us towards the customers that we really, really want to work with and want to help grow and establish, but it's also meant that we're able to guide other people and other businesses in that direction as well. So it's been brilliant. It's been a great couple of years. Hard, obviously, pandemic, COVID, but it's been brilliant, and I'm really excited to see where the next 12 months take us.
Looking back, do you think that initial trepidation that you had about using your ethics, putting them front and center, you know, talking about veganism, those kind of things, do you think that was actually, that there was some substance to it? Or do you think it was something that you'd kind of almost internally invented, a kind of a worst case scenario, a bit of catastrophization, if you like?
I think there is some grounds. There will be people out there who, when they see us talking about veganism, sustainability, ethics, will say, "Oof, that's not for me." Yeah. And And actually, when we sat back and we sort of were thinking about, okay, well, do we start bringing our ethics to the front of the business, and are we going to turn people off? And when we sat back and we thought, well, realistically, the people we're going to turn off are the people who aren't aligned with us anyway, and will have very different ideas on what success looks like. And it will be, it could potentially be money at any expense. You know, I need to make a profit at any expense. I don't care what happens. I want to be a millionaire and I want to have a super yacht type thing, or billionaire and I want to have a super yacht. And if that's their mentality, then we would never be the right people to work with them anyway, because that's not our mentality. And how can we do the best work for someone who has got that mindset when we don't align with that, you know? So if talking about veganism and ethics and sustainability puts someone off from working with us, then actually we sort of came to the conclusion that that's a good thing, because it means that we won't waste our time talking to those people, and we can use that time to talk to people who are ethically aligned, or we can invest that time in them to help them grow. So I think there will definitely be people out there who will be completely turned off by what we talk about, but that's a good thing in our eyes.
When you're talking to businesses, clients, potential clients, and they have similar trepidation, is one of the things that they cite, one of the things that they're concerned about, particularly maybe if they're squarely a vegan business, is that the sheer numbers, the numbers factor. There's only 1% of people that I'd be selling to if I put vegan in the title of this piece of marketing. Is that a sort of a pressing concern, and how do you potentially overcome that kind of worry for people?
It can be a concern, definitely. Of course it is. It's a small market. But then it's a case of looking at the numbers. So, for example, for us, we don't need a huge amount of companies to work with us in a year to make our business viable. So for us, it doesn't matter that the market's small. We don't need millions and millions of customers every year to make our business viable. So it's a case really of looking at each individual business and working out, okay, based on what your service or your product is, based on the size of the market, how many of those people do you need to convert? And realistically, even though the vegan sector is small, it's still a huge amount of people. And it may be that product isn't necessarily just interested in, and products are interesting to a vegan sector. So if it's, for example, a beauty product and it's got vegan ethics, that doesn't mean that someone who isn't vegan won't buy that product. And so the work that there needs to be done is working out, okay, so if we've got this product, and yes, it's a vegan product, but it's relevant to general consumers, how do we make sure that product is attractive? How do we build that brand to make sure that it's attractive to the general consumer, but at the same time is attractive to the vegan consumer? So it's very much a case-by-case basis, and working out, okay, well, working out based on your business and your product and your service, who do we need to talk to and who is it relevant to? Because actually, yes, it's, like I said, it's a vegan product, but it might not just be of interest to vegans. There could be a whole flexitarian sector that we could talk to, that we can obviously get your product in front of and work that way. So it's very much a company by company basis.
Is that a sector almost, I guess, because it's bigger, the potential kind of the either vegan adjacent, vegan curious, flexitarian, that kind of market space? I suppose I think I read some stat recently that like 50% of the British population buy a product that's categorised as vegan or plant-based every week, which is like crazy and it's suddenly like it opens the world out for like a vegan business. Does that impact, do you think, your approach as you know, from a creative perspective, from a marketing point of view? Because I'll give an example of what I'm kind of driving at, I guess. Like, there are like businesses who very squarely don't use the word vegan ever because they don't want to alienate those 50%. They kind of want to show them that there's some ethics to it, but ethics that they're comfortable with, even if they are actually vegan. And then there's others who, you know, actually the word vegan is kind of fine now, and people's perception of it is changing, and so on and so forth. Is there a particular switch in approach that you would kind of advise, or is it kind of very case by case depending on the business?
I would say it's very much case by case. So there are some businesses that are vegan through and through, their product is vegan through and through, their target market is vegan, and therefore, yes, shout from the rooftops that you are vegan. There are some products, and there are some people also as well that want to almost challenge the word vegan as being something that we should hide from. So there's because obviously for some people you say the word vegan and they're worried that it will make people think of extremists and sandal wearers and all the rest of it, and they don't want to be associated with that, so they will shy away from it. And other people are saying, no, we want to reclaim this word, we want to change the whole concept of veganism, and we want to show them that it's inclusive and it's everyone and every type of person. But equally, we had a conversation with a company that we were working with last year, and they wanted to use the term vegan as part of their business name. And we were having a conversation with them around it because their product is vegan, the thing that they're selling is vegan. But when we were talking to them about it, about branding the company that the product will be sold through, we actually advised them against using the word vegan because the two business owners aren't vegan. They're flexitarian, they get it, they understand, but they aren't vegan. And we said to them, look, if you label your company as vegan, people will expect you to be vegan. So, they'll expect every part of your business to be vegan. So you can't take that name if you're not going to commit to being vegan. And it was something that they'd never really considered, because for them, when we said to them about, vegan is more than a diet, they'd never really considered it, because for them it was a diet. And we do eat vegan, and we get it and we understand it. It was like, but vegan isn't just your diet. Vegan is your whole life. It's everything. And so that was a really interesting conversation to have with them, where we actually advised them against using it. But there are other people where we would say, do it, nail that to the front of your business, and make sure everybody knows that this is vegan. So it is case by case, and it's making sure that when you use that word, you're using it correctly and you're not muddying the water. Because I know there's a lot of people that are very adverse to the term plant-based. They don't like the fact that plant-based is being used and we should be using vegan. But I think, sort of going back to the whole conversation we had around the plant-based burgers and the fact that they help people transition, I think the term plant-based is a really useful term to help people to transition to veganism. Very much case by case, company by company, and really working out what is their mission, where do they want to position themselves, where is the brand positioning itself, and how do they want the brand to be seen by the mass market. And then once you understand that, it's working out, okay, what terminology do we use to make sure that message is what the consumer sees.
100%. Plant-based is a fascinating debate. We could go on for another hour about that one, but because I'm with you. I think it's a safe, friendly term for folks who aren't vegan to sort of feel like they don't have to be the what they consider to be extreme. I think where it becomes a little bit challenging is where I've seen people assuming that the terms are interchangeable and then selling a product that isn't ultimately vegan. There's a very big burger chain, for example, that has done this recently and uses the two words side by side for two different products. And one product is cooked with animal product, and one product isn't. And I think that is then, there's a potential for kind of misleading there. Like it almost needs to be kind of cleaned up as to, let's be clear, when we say plant-based, it isn't vegan, or it has the potential to not be. Yeah. And you need to kind of find that out. It's that's the only bit where I've spoken to folks before who've said, we should just switch to using plant-based, and then we would get rid of the stigma overnight and everything would be great. And I'm not quite sure. I think like you, I'm more in the fence of it has a purpose now and then, but for some people it's right, but we have to understand that there's a difference on what the two mean, and one's a lifestyle and one's a bigger ethical choice. It's fascinating, but we could go on about that for a long time. I don't want to take up too much of your time talking about plant-based.
Well, I will just say one thing though, in that I definitely would not say get rid of the term vegan. I think vegan is too strong, too powerful a word. I think what we need to do with the term vegan is reclaim it and almost rebrand it, so that people don't see it and think, oh, it's a load of, militant vegans and they've got to come and scream at me while I'm eating my burger, because yes, some people are very passionate and will be very in your face.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if you've just heard the dog in the background. So there are some activists out there that are very strong and very passionate and will be quite militant. And I had a conversation with someone before about, should we be doing that? And I said, yes, for some people, they need that. They need that really in your face. This is what you're doing. This is the decisions you're making. This is what you're contributing to. But for other people, it's too much. And it's actually really, it pushes them away. So we also need the softly approach. We need both. And I think the danger that we've got with the term plant-based is that I've heard quite a few examples of companies labelling their products as plant-based, but when you look at the products, it's like 40% plant, 60% chicken, 40% plant, 60% beef. And that's really scary to see, because that is going to get really, really confusing for the consumer. So we've always said, whenever we've sort of talked about the plant-based terminology, we've always said, make sure that you still have vegan somewhere within your packaging, somewhere on your site, somewhere within your literature, so that people, it's more relevant to physical product, but make sure you still get the vegan term on there, whether you're accredited by the Vegan Society and you have that label, or you have your own certification, whatever it is that you do. If your product is vegan but you're using the term plant-based at the front of your packaging, make sure you've got vegan on there still, so that people can quickly and easily see whether that product is a muddy plant-based product or it's a true vegan plant-based product.
I like that term. That's a good one. We'll borrow that one. I'm really conscious of your time. I've inquired around lots of different things, but I do want to ask a couple of questions if you've got time to delve in. But I don't want to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, no, I'm all good.
Okay, as long as you're all good. What have you learnt along the way? From a point of view of, you've been in publishing, you've been in marketing for some time now, and then made the decision to put your ethics front and center. Felt a bit queasy with where you were at in that world. Was there any kind of startling revelations for you, almost in the things that you were involved with and the businesses that you were involved in, that you perhaps, if you had your time again, or perhaps starting from things now, you'd approach differently or you'd look at differently?
I think probably one of the most surprising things for me, looking at where I came from and to what we do now, is discovering that print isn't always vegan.
Right.
And having worked for a big multinational magazine publisher, printing God knows how many magazines every day, every week, every month, the idea that one business in the world at that scale could be involved with animal exploitation, and I was a part of that for so long, it has been really... It's really kind of blown my mind, realising that something so innocent looking as a magazine or a pamphlet or a brochure or even a book could be involved in animal exploitation. And sort of to give you some information around what I'm talking about here, it's in regards to the inks that are used, and also the glue that is used, and also the lamination process. So inks used in printing can quite often have animal products within them. So whether that's gelatin, whether that's bone char, whether it's crushed up beetles to make shellac. A lot of people have heard of, obviously, the red pigment can quite often be crushed up beetles. So realising that inks can be non-vegan, but also the glues. So, you know, you hear these stories of back in the day when horses were sent to be made into glue, and you kind of think that's an old school thing, and we don't do that anymore, and we've got synthetic glues and all the rest of it. And yes, there are a lot of synthetic glues out there, but animal-based glues are still used in the modern day world. Even when we have all of these alternatives, we're still using animal-based glues, and interestingly, quite often it's being used in bookbinding. So that was a massive eye-opener, or a massive shock to me when we discovered that. But the great thing is that there are lots of alternatives. So obviously, I mentioned in regards to the synthetic glues with your bookbinding and your printing processes, there are synthetics. And there are lots of printers out there who do use the synthetic option as standard. And in regards to the inks as well, there are vegetable-based inks that can be used. And there was a study done in regards to comparing animal-based inks and vegetable-based inks to see whether one was a better quality or not. And the study found that vegetable-based inks were actually a much better quality product. They delivered a better end result. They were more luminous. They were more vibrant. And the other amazing thing as well about vegetable-based inks is that also much better for the environment, not just in the fact of how they're physically made, because obviously grown in the ground and all the rest of it, they're not animals being killed, but also they are easier to wash off of packaging, so the recycling process is easier. They're non-toxic. When they dry, the different inks release a type of chemical when they dry into the air. And vegetable-based inks release something like 5% of this toxic chemical into the air as they dry, whereas animal-based inks release something like 40% of this toxic product into the air. So these animal-based inks and glues are still being used, but the vegan alternative is available and widely available, and actually much better for the environment and obviously for the animals. And it's been great because when we discovered that, we spoke to some of our printing suppliers and said, "Oh my God, like, what are you using? What's going on?" And most of them were already using vegetable-based or synthetic-based products. And we actually also discovered a printing partner who are Vegan Society approved. So so there are people out there who are already on it and have got alternative options. So that was really great to not only first obviously discover and go, "Oh my God," but then be able to quite quickly find partners that we could work with for client projects that can make sure the project isn't harming any animals. So that was. So
lots were actually. Did you find lots of printers and so on were actually more aware of it than you thought? Then was it a bit of a surprise?
Quite a few of the ones that we worked with had to go away and check. So it wasn't it wasn't something that they were necessarily aware of, the sort of front of mind. There was a couple of companies we spoke to who are like sort of online printers, and their inks were animal based. So we don't work with them anymore. But and then when we found that the ones we were working with kind of had to go away and check, we thought, well, it's not central to their mission. So I wonder if we can find a print supplier where it is central to their mission. And that's when we found the company that we predominantly choose to work with as a standard, who are Vegan Society approved. You know, they clearly care. They've gone and they've done the accreditation process, and they've got the certification, and we know they're as passionate about it as we are. So yeah, that was good.
I love this whole approach. Just the idea that, you know, when you're aligned with other people's ethics, other businesses' ethics, the relationship is just going to be better from front to back. You know, it just makes perfect sense. You know, when you think about it, you know, if your mission is to make billions of dollars and so on and so forth at any cost, then find a business that wants to do that. But if your mission is to you know, do things ethically and sustainably and think about the choices you're making, you know, why not work with people who want to do the same? So I love your approach. I really do. Time is really getting away from us, and I've spoken far too much because it's been fascinating to chat. I really do thank you for your time, Kayleigh. It's been amazing. But it would be remiss of us not to tell folks where to go about finding you, particularly, if you're a business owner, maybe a vegan business owner, and want some support. Where would people go about getting in touch?
So probably one of the easiest places to find us is our website, which is KakaduCreative.com, and Kakadu is Kakadu and then creative, all one word. You can find me on LinkedIn, so Kayleigh Nicolaou. I won't bother trying to spell it. You'll probably be in the show notes or something, so just look for it.
I'll pop it in the show notes.
People always struggle with my name. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm quite active on there. And then we're on Instagram, Facebook, and the handle is at Kakadu Creative. So a few different ways to find us. And yeah, we're really keen to help more vegan and purpose-led businesses to grow this year and beat the big boys, as we've sort of covered, and make sure that they're winning over these big ones that are just in it for the money.
Let's do it. 100%. Love it. Kayleigh, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to get you back on because I think there's probably another at least 2 hours I could spend chatting to you about all sorts of things and getting your opinion on. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by VegOne from the Vegan Society. VegOne is the nutritional vitamin and mineral supplement designed for vegans by vegans. Launched back in 2005 and rebranded in 2021 with a fantastic new plastic-free package, VegOne provides nutritional support alongside a healthy and balanced vegan diet, all for an affordable price. With a 6-month supply available for just £12.70, VegOne will cost you little over £2 a month and offers EU nutrient reference values, or NRVs, of vitamin B12, D3, iodine, selenium, B2, B6 and folic acid. VegOne is chewable, it's affordable and reliable, you can take it once a day, it's available in fantastic orange and blackcurrant flavours, super easy and convenient, completely plastic free. So why not head over to vegansociety.com, search for VegOne and take your next healthy steps into the world of veganism.